Hello, my dears. Tonight's story follows Mira Shah, a pastry chef with a dangerous mouth, a wounded heart, and a professional hatred for anyone who called dessert playful. It also follows Zara Voss, her most elegant rival, a woman who could reduce a room to silence by sharpening a knife correctly. They had competed for awards, restaurant investors, magazine covers, and the last word in more interviews than either of them would admit. But when a snowstorm trapped them inside one mountain cabin with one bed, one fireplace, and one blanket, Mira discovered something deeply inconvenient. Some rivalries are not built from hate. Some are built from noticing too much. I arrived at the Hollow Pine Culinary Retreat with the confidence of a woman who had survived 2 delayed trains, 1 shuttle driver who treated mountain roads like personal dares, and a paper cup of coffee so bitter it seemed to have unresolved childhood issues. Snow fell over Vermont in thick, theatrical flakes, the kind of snow that made everything look expensive and emotionally available. The lodge sat at the top of the hill, all dark timber, golden windows, and smoke rising from stone chimneys, like the building had secrets and a very good publicist. I dragged my suitcase across the porch, trying not to slip in boots that had looked practical online and fraudulent in weather. Inside, the lobby smelled of pine, cinnamon, wood smoke, and professional ambition. Chefs from across the country stood in clusters, laughing too loudly, complimenting each other too precisely, and pretending not to measure one another's knives. I went straight to the check-in desk. "Mira Shah," I said, placing my ID on the counter. "Pastry residency. Please tell me my cabin has heat, walls, and no rustic surprises." The woman behind the desk typed my name. Her smile held steady for 3 seconds. Then it changed. I knew that change. Anyone who has worked in restaurants knows it. It is the expression a hostess makes when a party of 12 arrives for a reservation made for 2, or when a man says, "I know the owner," and the owner has specifically asked not to know him. "I am so sorry," she said. No sentence has ever recovered from that beginning. She looked at the screen again, as if hoping the computer might develop mercy. "There seems to be a duplicate cabin assignment." "Duplicate?" I repeated, as in charming administrative flavor, or as in someone else is currently unpacking in my emotional support square footage. Before she could answer, a voice behind me said, "Given your relationship with square footage, I assume it has already filed a complaint." I did not turn around immediately. My body, unlike my judgment, recognized danger. Zara Voss stood behind me in a long charcoal coat, one hand resting on a black suitcase, the other holding leather gloves the color of espresso. Snow had touched her dark hair and somehow improved it. She looked calm, polished, and entirely untouched by transportation, weather, or human inconvenience. Zara always looked like the final draft of herself. "Zara," I said. "Mira." We said each other's names the way chefs say "behind" in a kitchen where someone is holding a hot pan, polite on the surface, full of threat underneath. For 3 years, Zara Voss and I had been professional rivals. The public version was simple. She cooked savory. I made pastry. She believed restraint was elegance. I believed restraint was what people called fear when they plated it on stoneware. The private version was less simple. She had beaten me at the New York Rising Chef Awards by 3 points and then told a journalist my dessert had been technically brilliant but emotionally evasive. Technically brilliant I could survive. Emotionally evasive was an assassination wearing good shoes. Since then, we had disagreed in interviews, at tastings, during panels, and once in the walk-in fridge of a Chicago restaurant where a sous chef had pretended to search for parsley for 11 full minutes rather than interrupt us. The receptionist looked between us, with the dawning horror of someone realizing she had assigned fire and gasoline to the same cabin. "I'm afraid both of you were assigned Pine Cabin 7. "One cabin?" I asked. "Yes." "With 2 rooms?" Her silence became architectural. "1 room," Zara said, reading the answer on the woman's face. The receptionist swallowed. "And 1 bed." I laughed once. Not because it was funny, because my nervous system had looked at the situation, checked its available tools, and selected public collapse with comedic garnish. Of course, I said. Why would the universe waste a perfectly good snowstorm on emotional moderation? Zara's mouth moved slightly. Not a smile, a warning that a smile was considering becoming evidence. The retreat is fully booked, the receptionist said quickly, and because of the storm, the roads are expected to close within the hour. We can provide extra linens and of course, we deeply apologize. Extra linens? I said. Wonderful. I have always wanted to build a boundary wall out of flannel. Zara removed one glove slowly. We can manage one night. I turned to her. We can? We are adults. I have seen no proof of that in the culinary industry. Then consider this research. The cabin key landed on the counter between us. Neither of us reached for it. That was the first honest thing we did all night. 2 Pine Cabin 7 was a 10-minute walk from the lodge, which in normal weather might have been scenic. In a snowstorm, it felt like being punished by a postcard. Zara walked beside me with infuriating balance. I, meanwhile, performed a complex physical dialogue with the ice, my suitcase, and several regrets. You are allowed to walk slower, she said. I am allowed to do many things. I rarely choose the wise ones. I remember. That sounded personal. It was. The cabin appeared through the snow, small and golden windowed, tucked between pine trees heavy with white. Smoke curled from its chimney. It looked romantic, which felt aggressive under the circumstances. Inside, it was worse. Warm wood walls, a small kitchen, a round table, a fireplace already glowing low, a bathroom behind a sliding door, a narrow sofa clearly designed by someone who believed human spines were theoretical, and in the center of the sleeping area, one large bed covered in a thick white duvet. One bed. One. Singular. A thesis statement with pillows. Well, I said. At least subtlety died warm. Zara rolled her suitcase inside. I'll take the right side. You'll take? You were about to claim the left. I was not. You looked at it like it owed you rent. I stepped inside and shut the door. The click sounded far too intimate. Fine, I claim the left side, and the kitchen counter from 7 to 8. I have prep notes. I need the counter too. For what? Work. You make broths. That is not work. That is water with ambition. And you make sugar architecture for people afraid of cake. I pointed at her. That was almost rude. It was precise. I hated her. I hated her with the clean satisfaction of a person who had arranged an entire emotional shelf around hating someone and did not appreciate the shelf being inspected. But the cabin was warm. The snow was falling harder. Zara was removing her coat, and beneath it she wore a black sweater that made her look less like my rival and more like a problem the room had decided to keep. I looked away first. That annoyed me. Zara noticed. That annoyed me more. We divided the cabin with the diplomacy of hostile nations. My suitcase took the luggage rack. Hers took the chair. She placed her knives in a neat roll on the table. I placed my notebooks, chocolate samples, and emergency espresso packets across the counter in what I considered creative order and what Zara called a crime scene with vanilla. There is only one blanket, she said, opening a cupboard. No, there is a duvet on the bed. That is bedding. This is a blanket. I'm glad we have a linen philosopher in residence. She took the blanket and folded it over one arm. I stared. Excuse me. You run cold? I run justice. You may share it. If you behave. The fireplace cracked softly. Outside, the storm pressed white hands against the windows. I should have said something sharp, something final, something that reminded both of us that we were competitors, not companions, and that sharing a cabin did not mean sharing softness. Instead, I said, your generosity will be noted in my memoir. Zara looked at me then, really looked, and for a second, the rivalry between us lost its easiest shape. I would read it, she said. That was the first thing she said all night that sounded dangerous, for reasons unrelated to professional sabotage. I turned toward the counter before my face could become evidence. Don't, I said. Don't what? Say things like that in a room with one bed. Behind me, Zara was quiet, then softly, then stop pretending the bed is the dangerous part. 3. The power went out at 6. It did not announce itself gently. The lamp above the sink simply gave up, the refrigerator sighed into silence, and the fairy lights someone had strung along the mantel blinked out like a held breath finally released. Well, I said into the sudden dark, there goes my counter time. There goes the retreat's final tasting, Zara said, and for the first time all evening, she sounded less like my rival and more like a colleague standing at the edge of a genuine problem. Both of us pulled out our phones at the same moment. A message had already arrived from the retreat coordinator, sent in the particular tone of someone trying not to panic in writing. Power outage across the property due to storm. Backup generator supports lodge kitchen only. Final tasting may need to relocate or cancel. Please stay in your cabins until further notice. Cancel, I repeated. They can't cancel the final tasting. Half these chefs flew across the country for that investment panel. Including us, Zara said. Including us, I agreed. And something unpleasant settled in my stomach, because we both knew exactly what that investment meant. A single backer, choosing a single concept for a single restaurant. Whoever impressed the panel tomorrow night would walk away with the kind of funding neither of us could turn down. Zara was already moving toward the small kitchen, opening cabinets with the brisk efficiency of someone taking inventory in an emergency. What are you doing? If the lodge kitchen is the only one with power, then every chef on this mountain is about to fight over 4 burners. She glanced at me. We have a working fireplace and a gas stove that doesn't care about the grid. I looked at the stove, then at her, then at the modest collection of pantry items lined along the shelf. Flour, a few eggs, butter wrapped in paper, a small bag of hazelnuts someone had thoughtfully stocked for the residency. You're suggesting we cook, here, together. I'm suggesting that if the tasting happens at all tomorrow, it will happen because someone found a way to make it happen tonight, in the dark, with a rival they can't stand. I never said I couldn't stand you. You implied it, repeatedly, in 3 separate interviews. Those were professional opinions. They were personal opinions wearing professional shoes. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I crossed the small kitchen and looked at what we had to work with, because underneath the sarcasm, underneath the years of magazine covers and clipped answers to reporters, there was still the oldest instinct I owned. When the kitchen is in trouble, you cook your way out. Fine, I said, but I lead pastry. I lead savory, obviously. And you don't touch my broth. I wouldn't touch your broth with a diplomatic envoy. Zara almost smiled. Almost. We worked by candlelight and firelight, the storm hammering softly at the windows, and something in the cramped, uneven rhythm of it began to feel less like competition and more like the thing neither of us had done together in 3 years. Cook in the same room without an audience keeping score. She reduced a broth with a patience I found infuriating and admired despite myself. I burned a batch of sugar for a caramel and swore in 2 languages. Zara did not laugh at me. That, somehow, was worse than if she had. You're not going to say anything? I asked, scraping the ruined pan into the sink. About what? About the sugar, the swearing, the general spectacle. I've seen you burn sugar before, she said, not looking up from her pot. Once, in front of 40 judges. I remember. You were sitting in the front row, wearing an expression like you'd ordered the moment specially. I wasn't smiling at your mistake. You were absolutely smiling. I was smiling, she said, finally glancing at me, because you kept going. You didn't stop the plate, you just adjusted, mid-service, like the mistake was information instead of failure. I did not know what to do with that sentence. It sat in the warm kitchen air like something too fragile to pick up quickly. That's the nicest thing you've ever said about me, I said carefully, and it took a power outage to get it out of you. Apparently that's what it takes. I started a second batch of caramel, and this time it came out the way it was supposed to. Amber, not burnt, the kind of color that made pastry chefs a little religious. Zara looked over my shoulder at it. That's better, she said. High praise from the broth philosopher. I don't philosophize about broth. You absolutely do. You just do it with your face. She huffed. An actual huff, undignified and human, And for a moment, the Zara Voss who reduced rooms to silence with a correctly sharpened knife disappeared, replaced by someone who looked, in the candlelight, tired and real, and unexpectedly easy to be near. 4. The retreat's welcome dinner had been meant for the great room of the lodge, but with half the cabins dark and the roads impassable, the organizers pushed it back to a smaller candlelit gathering in the lounge. Plates passed hand to hand, wine poured generously, because no one could drive anywhere regardless. Zara and I walked in together, because it would have been stranger to arrive separately from a cabin 50 other chefs already knew we shared. "Is that Zara Voss's cabin mate?" someone murmured, not quietly enough. "Statistically probable," I said, before anyone could ask me directly. A photographer I half recognized from a food magazine leaned toward his colleague. "Did I hear you two are sharing a room?" "No," I said. "You said that with the confidence of someone lying. Respect the craft." Beside me, Zara accepted a glass of wine with the composed grace of a woman entirely unbothered by rumor, though I noticed, because apparently I now noticed things about Zara Voss, that her jaw had tightened slightly at the word sharing. The dinner unfolded in the particular performance of industry gatherings, chefs complimenting dishes they privately thought were derivative, investors asking careful questions with careless answers already prepared, everyone laughing at the right moments and measuring each other's plates the entire time. I ended up seated across from Zara, which felt less like an accident and more like the retreat's seating chart had developed a sense of humor. "You two seem tense tonight," said Priya, a chef I'd known since culinary school, refilling her own glass. "More tense than usual, I mean." "We're fine," Zara said smoothly. "We're cabin mates," I added, because apparently my mouth had decided honesty was the evening's theme. "By administrative disaster, not choice." "One bed," Priya said, delighted. "I heard." "The rumor mill here operates faster than the actual storm," I muttered. "Faster than the generator?" "Certainly," Zara said, and for a moment, our eyes met across the table, something private passing between us that had nothing to do with pastry or broth or investment panels. Later, when the wine had loosened the room and someone had begun playing an old guitar badly, but earnestly by the fire, I excused myself to the corridor outside the lounge, needing air that didn't smell like ambition and candle wax. I found the small bathroom near the coat closet and stood in front of the mirror for a moment too long. "You are an adult," I told my reflection. "You can survive one night with a woman who once told a journalist your dessert was emotionally evasive." "Did I really hurt you that much?" I closed my eyes. Zara's voice, from the doorway, low and unguarded in a way the dinner hadn't allowed. "Of course you're here," I said, not turning around. She leaned against the frame, arms crossed, though the posture looked less defensive than it usually did. "I've thought about that interview more than I've told anyone," she said. "The emotionally evasive line. Regretting your poetry? Regretting the timing, not entirely the words." She hesitated. "Your dessert that year was technically brilliant. It also felt like it was protecting something." I said it because I recognized it. I didn't say it kindly. I turned to face her, arms crossed to match hers, some instinct insisting on symmetry even in defense. "I was angry," I said, "because you made it sound like I was a coward, hiding behind technique instead of actually saying something. I never thought you were a coward." "Then what did you think?" She looked at me, calm and direct in the way that had always undone the other side of any argument before it started. "I thought you were protecting something," she said, "the same way I do, if I'm honest. I just build my walls out of restraint instead of jokes." That sentence landed too close to a locked door inside me, one I had spent 3 years insisting didn't exist. "That's an unfairly generous thing to say to someone you're competing against for a restaurant," I said, because it was easier than answering it directly. "I'm aware," Zara said. "I said it anyway." 5. We walked back to the cabin together, through snow that had softened into something gentler, drifting rather than driving, catching in Zara's dark hair the way it had the first time I saw her that day. Except this time I let myself notice it without immediately hating myself for noticing. Inside, the fire had burned low. Zara added another log while I peeled off my boots and sat heavily on the edge of the bed, the only surface in the cabin not currently occupied by pastry notebooks or knife rolls. "You should sleep," she said eventually, glancing over from the small desk where she'd set up her laptop, ostensibly to finalize notes for tomorrow's tasting. "I have prep to finish. You've rewritten the same paragraph 4 times. I've been watching. That's invasive. That's observant." She closed my laptop gently, her hand resting briefly on the lid before she looked up at me. "You should sleep, Mira." Her hand, when it moved, landed on my wrist instead of the laptop. Not holding, not forcing, just there, warm against skin that had gone suddenly, embarrassingly aware of every nerve ending in that specific location. My pulse betrayed me immediately. Zara's gaze dropped, briefly, to my mouth. I should have said something honest. I had, apparently, an entire locked door's worth of honest things available, freshly excavated by a bathroom conversation and a walk through gentling snow. Instead I said, "Well, this is an efficient way to make tomorrow awkward." The moment died exactly the way I'd engineered it to. Zara withdrew her hand, and something in her expression closed, precise and controlled again. The Zara Voss who reduced rooms to silence with a knife, instead of the one who'd stood in a bathroom doorway and told me she recognized my walls because she built the same ones. "Good night, Mira," she said, and went to change in the bathroom, leaving me alone with the fire and the specific familiar shame of having ruined something on purpose, because ruining it felt safer than finding out what would happen if I let it continue. 6 morning arrived in soft light and unresolved tension. Zara was already awake, standing near the window in yesterday's sweater, watching snow that had finally, mercifully, begun to slow. "Bathroom is free," she said, not turning around. "Good morning to you too." It is morning, and yet goodness remains under review. She didn't answer that, which was somehow worse than if she'd argued. I wanted to apologize. I wanted to explain that the joke last night hadn't been about her, not really, that it had been about the terrifying honesty of her hand on my wrist and the way I had no defense prepared for it. I wanted to say all of that. Instead, I looked for my phone like a coward, searching for technology, found it, and used it as an excuse to say nothing at all. We ate a quiet breakfast of instant coffee and the last of the hazelnuts, toasted in the small skillet, because apparently, even in an emotional standoff, neither of us could resist improving a snack. "The retreat coordinator says the roads should clear by afternoon," Zara said eventually. "Power's expected back at the lodge by midday. The tasting's back on for tonight." "Good," I said. "Good. That's good. You're repeating yourself. I'm aware." She almost smiled, the first crack in the morning's careful frost. "There's a village market 2 miles down, apparently. Some of the other chefs are walking down for fresh ingredients before the roads officially reopen to cars. I'm going." A pause. "Come or don't?" It was the don't that made me go. Not pressure, not a dare, though it would have sounded like one from anyone else. From Zara, it was something closer to an honest door left open. No obligation attached. 7. The village was small and postcard perfect, in the particular way New England towns become after a storm. Snow banked high along quiet streets, a church steeple white-capped against a pale sky, a market square strung with lights that had survived the outage on their own stubborn wiring. We walked without much conversation at first, boots crunching in rhythm, breath visible in the cold air, and something about the silence felt less like the frost of the morning and more like two people simply existing beside each other without needing to perform anything. "My mother used to make something like this," I said eventually, nodding toward a stall selling small spiced pastries, cinnamon and cardamom rising warm off the tray. Not the same recipe, but the same, I don't know, insistence that sugar could fix a bad day. Zara didn't interrupt. She had a way of listening that I hadn't expected from someone who'd spent 3 years dismantling my work in print. She listened like she was holding a door open and letting me decide, at my own pace, whether to walk through it. "She ran a small bakery in Jersey City," I continued. Not glamorous, not investment panel glamorous anyway, but people lined up before dawn for her cardamom buns. I used to think that was the whole job, feeding people something warm enough that they forgot, for 5 minutes, whatever they were carrying. What happened to it? She got sick. I was 22, in the middle of culinary school, and I had to choose between finishing my program or running the shop. I chose the program. I watched my own breath fog and disappear. The shop closed within a year. I told myself it was practical. It was also the first time I learned that leaving is easier when you dress it up as ambition. That sounds lonely, Zara said softly. It was efficient. Loneliness often is. I glanced at her, startled by how exactly that landed, how she'd said it without a trace of pity, just plain recognition, the kind that comes from someone who has done the same math on their own life. What about you? I asked. Your restraint. I gestured vaguely at all of her, the composed coat, the even voice, the general architecture of a woman who never once looked rattled in public. Where did that come from? Zara was quiet for a moment, watching a child across the square build something ambitious and doomed out of snow. My father was a chef, she said. A good one. Difficult. He believed emotion in the kitchen was sloppiness, that anyone who let feeling onto a plate hadn't mastered their craft yet. I spent my entire childhood learning to cook exactly what he wanted, exactly the way he wanted it, and being told that the version of me that cried or laughed too loudly at the pass wasn't ready for a real kitchen. That's not restraint, I said quietly. That's armor. I know that now, she said. I didn't always. And the interview? The emotionally evasive line? She exhaled, something almost like a laugh, but sadder. I think I saw a version of my own hiding in your dessert and called it a flaw instead of admitting I recognized it. We stood there for a moment, snow settling gently on both our shoulders, the market's noise and warmth a soft blur around us, and I understood, with the particular clarity cold air sometimes provides, that we had spent 3 years mistaking recognition for rivalry. 8. The fight happened later, back at the cabin, while we were both getting ready for the final tasting, and it happened, as these things often do, over something small enough to hide behind. Zara stood at the small mirror, fastening an earring, dressed in the kind of quiet black dress that looked deceptively simple and cost, I would have guessed, more than my monthly rent. She looked, unfairly, like the exact ending of every sentence I'd been avoiding all day. You look, I started, and then heard myself, and panicked. I look what? Ready to win, I said instead, the word coming out flatter and more clipped than I meant it. Professional armor snapping back into place before I could stop it. Zara's hands went still at her earring. Is that what you really wanted to say? No. Then why say it? Because you make honesty feel like standing too close to fire, I said. And even as I said it, I heard how unfair it was, how much it was really about me and not about her at all. And you make jokes because leaving is easier than being seen, Zara said, and her voice had gone very quiet, very controlled, the tone she used right before a room went silent for her. That's not fair, isn't it? You've spent 2 days telling me the truth, and then closing the door on it the second it lands somewhere real. Last night, this morning, just now. I keep opening something and you keep slamming it before either of us has to look at what's inside. Maybe I don't want to look, I snapped. Maybe some of us learned a long time ago that looking too closely at what we want gets it taken away. That's not an excuse. That's a habit. And I recognize it, because I have the same one. I just call mine restraint instead of comedy. We stood there, the cabin suddenly too small for both the fight and the fire crackling indifferently beside it, and I hated how much of what she'd said was true, and I hated more that hating it didn't make it less true. We have a tasting to get to, I said finally, because it was the only sentence available that didn't require me to be honest. We do, Zara said, and something in her face closed again, precise and distant, and we finished dressing in a silence that felt, for the first time since the receptionist handed over that key, genuinely cold. 9. The final tasting had been moved to the lodge's great room, power restored, candles still lit anyway because someone had decided the ambiance was worth keeping. Investors sat at a long table near the fire, plates arriving one by one, each chef given a brief window to present. I had a prepared speech to accompany my dessert course, polished, safe, the kind of language that photographed well in magazine profiles, all technique and no confession. Then I looked up and saw Zara across the room, already finished with her course, standing at the edge of the crowd, watching me. Not angry, not soft either. Just present, in the particular way she'd been present in a bathroom doorway 2 nights ago, in a snowy market square that morning, in every moment I'd tried and failed to close a door on her. I put the prepared speech aside. This dessert, I said, and heard my own voice shake slightly, is built around burnt sugar. Most pastry chefs treat a burnt batch as a failure to hide. I used to as well. I glanced involuntarily at Zara. I've spent a long time writing about leaving recipes half-finished if they threatened to say too much, leaving conversations before they got too honest, leaving my mother's bakery before I had to watch it disappear slowly. I think, if I'm honest, I wrote about leaving because staying frightened me more. The room had gone quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet when someone says something true instead of something polished. This caramel almost burned last night, in a cabin with no power, made by 2 people who've spent 3 years insisting they had nothing to learn from each other. It didn't burn, it came out amber, because someone stayed in the room long enough to tell me it was better, instead of just letting me ruin it alone. I took a breath. I'm grateful to the person who noticed where I stopped. I didn't look at Zara when I said it. I didn't need to. I felt her attention the way you feel heat from a fire, without turning toward it. The panel applauded, uncertain what exactly they were clapping for, and I stepped back from the table with my heart going too fast for a room that was, technically, just about dessert. 10. After the event, I returned to the cabin alone, unsure whether Zara would follow, unsure what I wanted more, that she would or that she wouldn't, and I wouldn't have to find out what came next. She was standing near the window when I came in, still in the black dress, the fire throwing warm light across the side of her face. "Congratulations," she said. "Thank you. You came back," she said. And there was something underneath the simple words, some question she wasn't asking directly. I did. The cabin felt different now, not like a trap 2 women had been dropped into by administrative error. Like a room either of us could still choose to leave, and neither of us was leaving. "I'm sorry," I said. Not in a clever way, not with a joke attached. Just sorry. For last night, for this morning, for slamming doors you were brave enough to open. Zara turned fully to face me. "What do you want now?" I breathed in, and for once let the honest answer arrive without dressing it in sarcasm first. "You," I said. "I want you. I think I've wanted you for longer than I knew what to call it. Longer than the rivalry, maybe longer than either of us has been willing to admit out loud." Zara didn't move toward me immediately. She let me come to her, the way she'd let me choose the market that morning, the way she'd always, underneath the composure, left the door open rather than pulling me through it. When I reached her, she lifted one hand to my face, her palm warm against skin gone cold from the walk back through snow. The first kiss was quiet, not rushed, not dramatic, not an answer to every argument we'd ever had in print or in person. But it was honest, and for once, I was there for it completely, not halfway out the door with a joke already prepared in case it got too real. 11 later, near morning, I woke before her. The cabin was quiet, snow outside finally still, the storm long since spent itself against the mountain. Zara slept beside me, dark hair loose against the white pillow, no longer my rival in the simple, easy way I had needed her to be for 3 convenient years. I got up carefully, wrapped the single blanket around my shoulders, the one she'd claimed on our first night, the one we'd shared without either of us mentioning it directly somewhere around 2 in the morning, and went to the window with my notebook. For the first time in years, I did not begin with a joke. I did not begin by leaving. I wrote one sentence, slowly, awkwardly, honestly, about burnt sugar and amber caramel, and a woman who stayed in a dark kitchen long enough to tell me it was better. When I looked back at Zara, still asleep in the tangled white sheets, sunlight just beginning to touch the pine trees outside, I understood something terrifying and gentle. I did not know exactly what we were yet, but for once, uncertainty did not feel like failure. It felt like morning,